People of all ages are finding using the internet is actually pretty easy. And you can see it in the numbers. You can see it in e-commerce. It's growing at double digits since roughly 1995. It continues to grow at double digits. For millennials, young people who are just becoming of voting age, the idea of getting in a car, taking time off of work, driving to a polling place, clicking on something or filling out something or stepping into a booth will be just incredible to them. Why can't I use my iPhone or my Android phone? That's the question they'll be asking. We don't have a good answer. We can't just say, well, we're afraid of the internet. We're afraid it's insecure. No, we can make it secure. We can make it better than the system we have today. Critics of the idea of voting on the internet will say we shouldn't even think about it. The security is just not there to do it. We need a perfect internet and perfect personal computers and perfect mobile phones. And when we have this perfect environment, then maybe we could consider internet voting. So in other words, we need to compare internet voting to what we have, not to some perfect system that will never, ever exist. We can stay ahead of the bad guys. No matter how good any system is, there will be somebody attacking it, trying to break into it. So we have to be vigilant. We have to constantly be improving the technology, as we have done for e-commerce. It's continuously getting better. That's what we need in terms of an attitude toward internet voting. We need to think big, act bold, start simple, and iterate fast from simple pilots to nationwide internet voting for all. Internet voting has many advantages. It can help increase voter participation. It can reach out to those who may be disabled. It can increase convenience for people who may have difficulty getting time off of work. It can deal with bad weather. It can improve on the ballots. The ballot complexity in some of these paper ballots is just incredible, whereas an interactive kind of an approach online would be much simpler and have fewer errors. There are challenges, however, to internet voting. The biggest challenge is fear. There are many people who think that it's just a really bad idea to have internet voting. I think it's a really great idea. And I can remember in the early 90s when I was advocating the widespread use of the internet for all aspects of our life, there were many, many skeptics. The banks said, we'll never connect our bank to the internet. Likewise with insurance companies and healthcare organizations. But today we find that actually the internet has become indispensable for moving money, for keeping our health records. Electronic health records are in place now for well over half of the population. So we can do it if we have the political and the technical will to do it. Do we want to have a large, single, federal, government, national election server? No. This is not healthcare.gov that we're talking about. This is precinct by precinct, state by state. Start small with pilots and then iterate, improve, learn, make it better. When thinking about internet voting, the concern many people have is security. And it's a legitimate concern. It must be secure. We have to think about what are we comparing an internet voting system to? Are we comparing it to some perfectly secure system that doesn't exist and will never exist? Or should we compare it to the system that we have, which is not secure, is not perfect, is far from perfect? Millions of votes don't get counted because of the manual, paper-based nature of our system. So can internet voting be secure? Absolutely, we can do this. I can tell you in the early 1990s, there was a great concern about e-commerce and putting a credit card on the internet? Impossible, can't be done. The security risk is too great. Last year, there was $340 billion worth of goods and services purchased online through Amazon and 2 million other retailers. So the technology exists. We know how to do it. We just need the political and technical will to begin the tests, begin the pilots. Not one big national approach, but precinct by precinct. We try it, we tweak it, we test it. By the way, some states have done these tests. West Virginia, Arizona, Utah have had online internet voting. In Utah, the Utah primary this year, people voted from 45 different countries. Utah people who were out of the country, they were able to vote. There were no security issues. It was highly satisfactory and the voters loved it. In the early 1990s, when the internet was young, the web was very, very young, there were a lot of skeptics. I visited with banks and insurance companies and hospitals all over the world and shared a vision for the future of the internet, what it could make possible, how we could connect people, how we could access information more effectively. The skepticism was incredible. I can recall CEOs of banks telling me, "John, that's a very interesting vision you have. I can see you're enthusiastic about it, but I just want to be clear. We will never connect our bank to the internet." Now, a bank not connected to the internet is a bank that's no longer a bank. So we have to think the same way about voting. Yes, security is crucial. Yes, there are issues. Can we address them like we did with e-commerce? Absolutely we can. Voting is different than e-commerce. It requires different solutions. It requires harder work. There's a lot of work to be done, but it can be done. If we have the will, the political will and the technical will, we can make internet voting available to all of our citizens. We can strengthen our democracy and have the highest voter participation in the world. With regard to the states, the Constitution made it very clear. Each state manages elections the way they want to. So we don't have a national election system. We have 50 state systems. And within the states, many states delegate down to a county, to a township, to a precinct, to a polling place. So we have over 100,000 places that you can vote in America. There's not one single place. So it's an ideal way to pilot internet voting as a way to increase voter participation, make things a bit more convenient, enable people in the military, missionaries who are working in foreign countries. There are so many millions of people who are disenfranchised by today's old-fashioned paper-based system. Overseas voters are really important. There's about 6 million of them, half of them protecting us. They're in the military and military contractors. They vote today pretty much the same way they did 100 years ago. In 1986, President Reagan signed a bill that asked the states to, let's do a better job in enabling our military to vote. 30 years later, it's still hard to vote if you're in the military. A test was done in 2004 using the internet. It was a very successful test, and they were ready to expand it, but there was not the political will. There were those who were concerned about security. They thought it was too risky. They didn't want the controversy, and so they killed the project. This is really a shame that our military and other overseas citizens cannot more easily vote. And it's not a handful of people, it's millions of people. Well, closed networks versus online networks is a matter of design. A closed network might mean that a person votes from an iPad at a polling place in a precinct, and the communication between that iPad and the server is in the room, and it goes no further than the room. That would be an extremely closed system. There's nothing wrong with that, but internet voting could be much better and could empower more people, could improve voter participation even further. A lot of people find it a hardship to go to the polling place, to get time off of work. They have to manage with their children and their health and disabilities and the weather. I mean, there's so many obstacles to using a closed system that could be eliminated by having an open system online with this powerful supercomputer we all have in our pocket or our purse, where we could vote from the privacy of our home. The difference between a closed system and an open internet-based system is mostly, in my opinion, a perception that the closed system is more secure. The closed system might be more secure, but it might not. And how do we know? So the internet has its risks, but the non-internet voting has its risks. Some states have mail-in voting as the predominant way to vote. Millions of people fill out the ballot, put it in an envelope, put that envelope in another envelope, put it in the mailbox. Then what happens? I have no idea. We have no idea if that envelope ever gets to the precinct. If it does get there, does it get opened? Does it get scanned? Or does your vote actually get counted? We don't know. And in the case of the military, there are millions of people in the military overseas protecting us, but to vote, they have to write a letter, get a ballot, fill it out, mail it. By the time it gets back to the voting precinct, the election's already over. So we have millions of people who are disenfranchised because we don't make it easy to vote. When you look at our democracy today, some people would challenge whether it actually is a democracy because half the people don't vote. And we only have two parties, effectively. Whereas when you look at the demographics of America and you look at how people feel on various issues, there isn't just a left and a right, a Republican or a Democrat. There are a lot of different points of view. With internet voting, we could use different techniques for voting to really bring out what the people feel, how they would approach various questions, various problems. You can't do that when you vote every 4 years on a piece of paper. It requires a more interactive, more frequent way to engage with the citizenry. People have a point of view. We should get that point of view and make sure the politicians understand it. Today, they're not really listening to us. We say we want this or that, and the politicians vote with a special interest group to keep themselves in place. If we could raise voter participation, many of these incumbents who vote in their interests, not our interests, would be challenged and perhaps would be voted out. In terms of the cost of voting, the way we do it today is extremely costly. If Amazon or other online retailers operated the way our election system voted, they would be bankrupt. We use primarily paper. There are those that argue that you can only have a verifiable election, a verifiable vote, if you have a piece of paper. That's not true. There are technology approaches to this that could provide the auditability, the verifiability, the security, the trust, the accuracy that everybody expects. And so in the system that we have to really compare internet voting to what we have, not compare internet voting to some perfect system. No system is perfect, but the internet could add a lot of advantages, a lot of convenience, a lot of accuracy, expanded voter participation, more reliability. It could be a much better system which would strengthen our democracy and give us new ways to provide civic engagement for our population, to be able to sample how people feel about things, to be able to have ranked choice voting so we can have 5 or 6 or 8 candidates and we sequence how we feel about them and then we roll up those votes to get a winner. This would change the way our democracy works in a very favorable way. In terms of the environment, certainly using the internet is more cost-effective, doesn't use the paper ballots, it doesn't require people to drive to a polling place. It's just so much simpler. If you look at the population of people in malls, shopping malls, it's going down. People would rather shop conveniently from home. The same thing is true of voting. We haven't addressed it in the past because it only happens every year, or every 2 years, or every 4 years. But it is so important to our democracy to be representative. And it's becoming increasingly not representative because it's not easy to vote. The internet has empowered all of us to do things that were previously not possible or previously very costly or inconvenient. We are empowered because of the internet, except to vote. And we could be more empowered, including to vote. We need a new attitude. I call it an election attitude. We need to think big, act bold, start simple, iterate fast. Think big. Let's have online voting for everybody. State by state, precinct by precinct, not a national centralized approach. Act bold. We should stand up to it and declare for the future we're going to take a long-term view. We are going to have internet voting. Start simple. Not everybody all the time. Let's take one state, one polling place, one precinct, one voting location, and have a pilot. learn from that pilot. Then the next year we make it better. We improve it. We make it easier. We get feedback. And then we iterate fast. We just keep improving it, improving it, improving it. Piloting is a great thing. Having a pilot is a way to start simple and iterate fast, a way to test and make sure things are going to work. And then you go the next step and the next step and the next step. This is what happened with the internet overall. In the early 90s, there were a lot of skeptics about the internet. You can't do this, you can't do that, it's insecure, it's unsafe, it's unreliable, it's slow, it just isn't made to do real things. It's a toy, it's just for kids, or it's just for games, or just for reading documents. Now we find it's central to our economy, it's central to moving money around the world, it's central to our healthcare. Physicians can be much better at delivering high-quality healthcare if they can share information electronically using the internet, and they are doing that now. So we have to take the long view of this. We have to think big, act bold, start simple, iterate fast, and we can have a much stronger democracy as a result.